And like, I don't follow recruiting, on the day-to-day boots on the ground basis. I know that Alabama has a really talented roster. Like, I know that Ole Miss has a really talented roster. I also watched them this year, and like, if Bama lined up next to Indiana, would I pick Alabama? Of course I would. Like, I'm not, or SMU, any of these teams. But I guess I am surprised at somebody like Kirk, who played college football, does, and in a sport that has such a small sample size, that there is not an emphasis on winning games. And again, like Indiana, winning games to the degree in which they did. And like, I guess I got frustrated, Happer. This is a long statement. I apologize. But like, it was like, yeah, well, maybe the lesson here is that, instead of just looking at record, like, you should dive a little bit deeper. It's like, okay, that's fine. But it's not like Indiana was 10-2. The margin of error that Indiana had was, look, your schedule sucks. You essentially have to win all of your games, and you have to do so in explosive fashion. And they did. Alabama, meanwhile, they had a more margin for error because their schedule was really tough. But you still can't lose 3 games and get in over a one-loss team, in my opinion. But I guess I am kind of worried that the lesson that is going to be learned this year for the committee is, no, maybe you should put the 3-loss team in. And maybe it wouldn't have been in over Indiana. It certainly could have been in over SMU. But, like, I don't know, man. It's just it's weird that someone who played the game wouldn't appreciate winning by the margin of victory they won by.
See, but I don't know. Like, and Ohio State is different now, but he played at Ohio State. Like that is one of the big. I'm sure every time they went out there is like, yeah, we're better, but we just lost. It's
true.
Like, I think that is the hubris. I think that happens sometimes with these SEC schools and to a certain point the Big Ten schools as well. Like they're like, well, we're better on paper because we are brand A, B, C. You could apply the same logic to why we buy into Nebraska every single year, regardless of the fact that they've sucked for the entire decade, or if you're like 20 years old for your entire life, basically. Like you can.
Great point.
It's the same logic. It's like, wow, they should be good because they're Nebraska. They recruit in the X. They recruit in the top 25. They have all this history and tradition. They have the greatest facilities and all this and that, but yet they suck all the time. And people are like, but look at the recruiting rankings, and look at how many championships they have, but that are more than Iowa. They should be better than Iowa. How many times in a year, or how many times in the span of 10 years where Nebraska's only beat Iowa one time, did you pick Nebraska to beat Iowa? Pretty much every time. Because of stuff like that. So we're victims or suspects, I guess, of it as well.
Wow, is there a topic to be had that Nebraska football fandom and media explains the college football discourse right now? Because I think it's kind of like looking into a mirror with some of the things you just said. Because you're right. By August, everyone will be like, yeah, well, of course Nebraska's going to be fine. They recruit better. They have better players than X. Look, they got this receiver from Kentucky, Dane Key. He's going to be the key that unlocks Nebraska football. And in the end, usually they're not the keys that unlock Nebraska football.
Yeah, it's the brands, like, and like, I don't blame, and I do this, like, I don't blame Nebraska fans for being like, hey, look at this. If we apply this same logic to every other team, we'd pick them to win, more games than they have. And that, like, this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year they finally break through and get to a bowl game, or get to 8 wins, or get to 9 wins, or get to the whatever, get to the playoff eventually. But, they still haven't done it until they do it. And it's the same, I think, logic that applies to how we look at the sport and how we look at the college football playoff. It's like, well, look at them on paper. But this has been universal, right? Isn't this always the case? This is not new with the playoff, right? It's new in the sense that these teams have access to it, I guess. But like, we've gotten undefeated group of 5 teams, for a long, long time now. And the conversation has always existed. I was like, oh, well, we can't put Boise State in there because they wouldn't beat X. They wouldn't beat Oklahoma. And then they do, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, geez, maybe there is something in the, in the margins that we can't really account for. Maybe there is something to, like, having a bunch of seniors and having a really good coach and all this stuff. And it trumps the recruiting rankings. Like, I don't know how many times we have to learn that lesson in order to actually take it as the truth, but apparently we're still learning.
By the way, your earlier comment, D'Lo says, what Connor said is likely the most accurate statement in I-80 history. So
Wow,
shout out to you, but also diss to Jack and I. Tough look for us.
I believe in accuracy, Josh. That's what I believe in.
Accurate boy. So what then, when we look to round 2, what would be good for the discourse? Does that even matter? Like, I guess I'm trying to find a way where, I mean, I guess it would just be like Boise beats Penn State, but even that like comes with this, but Penn State was a fraud the whole time. You're like, so even that doesn't fix all of the ills, but like, am I silly in wanting there to be results that happen on the field next week on Tuesday and Wednesday that result in everybody chilling out a bit? Or is the hay already in